Hi everyone. Today I'm going to sketch and paint this beautiful coffee shop in Kyoto, Japan, and I hope that you'll sketch and paint along with me. Supplies for today, I'm going to be using a 100% cotton 300 GSM sheet of paper in around an A4 size. I've got a 2B pencil for sketching, a Sailor Fude fountain pen filled with permanent brown ink, a white gel pen, a round size 8 brush, a 0.5 Micron pen in black, eraser, palette for mixing, palette of paints, water, and tissue paper for blotting. Today I've decided to show the entire sketching and painting process from start to finish without editing any of it out. This will give you the perfect opportunity to follow along and sketch and paint with me if you wish, and you'll see the entire process from start to finish. I had fully intended on filming this in real time, but after putting all of the tracks down, I realized that I really do sketch very slowly, and it made the video very long indeed. So although I'm running this at double speed, I am working very slowly in real time, so I feel that you still will be able to keep up. If at any time you feel that the video is moving at too fast a pace for you, feel free to pause whilst you catch up. Alternatively, you can use the settings at the top right of the screen to make the playback speed whatever you wish it to be. So you can absolutely sketch along with me, or if you prefer, the free downloadable and traceable sketch can be found by using the link in the description box below. I'm also putting the link to my website on the screen. You will find the downloadable sketches for all of my videos here at this website. So if you choose to trace the pencil sketch that is provided, then do that and catch up with me at the point where I start working in ink later on in this video. I am using a 2B pencil for my pencil sketch here. I found that a 2B pencil is soft enough that it's easy enough to erase, but also doesn't smudge all over the page like a 4B pencil would. I wish that I was able to sketch straight in ink like a lot of the more experienced urban sketchers can, but I'm just not at that point yet, and I don't have the confidence to go straight into ink, so I put down the pencil layer first. Although this is a sketch of the building from the front on, one can think that there's not all that much perspective, but there's quite a lot of things that we need to get the angles right here and in the right position, and that's why it gives me a bit more confidence to work in pencil first. If something doesn't look quite right, I can erase it and put it in the right position without being too stressed that it's in ink and that I can't shift it. I think really at the end of the day, you've got to do with your sketch what gives you the most enjoyment and the least amount of stress. And if doing a line pencil sketch first helps you to get a better end result and something that you're happier with, then by all means do a pencil sketch first. I think this is one of the reasons why I do stress a bit with sketching on location, that I often feel under time pressure to be able to finish something in a set amount of time before we move on or the people that I'm with want to get up and leave. As I said, I really do sketch very slowly, and so I often do prefer just to take the time sketching once I get home in the evening rather than on location where I might feel under time pressure. Otherwise, when I'm at location, I might get a pencil sketch and maybe a little bit of ink line work done as well, but then maybe I'll finish off and do the painting layer and shadow layers once I get home in the evening, whatever time allows on the day. I also find it a lot easier to sketch something from a photograph than on location, because with a two-dimensional photograph it's much easier to see the correct angles of lines that are slanting. It's much more difficult to do it when you are looking at it on location. So you can see I am slowly and progressively getting my sketch down on the page. I started by putting a few guide dots on the page just to indicate where the corners of the buildings and the roof will be. Then I put down some important vertical and horizontal lines, and now I'm working on putting in some of the furniture and bits and pieces that are surrounding the coffee shop. I find the vertical and horizontal lines always easiest to put down first, and then wherever there's a line that's slightly at an angle, like on the stair or the side of the box, I have a look at my reference photo and just have a look at the angle that those lines are at, just to give me the best idea. So a little bit of a background story with regards to this particular coffee shop. My husband and I were in Kyoto earlier this year in March. It was our first visit to Japan, and it was an absolutely spectacular holiday. On this particular day, we found ourselves in the area of the Golden Temple, and we wanted to go to the Golden Temple at sunset because that's when the lighting was going to be the best. So we had a bit of time to kill before sunset, and it was also a very cold day, so it was the perfect time to have a look for a good cup of coffee. As is my nature, I never look for coffee shops or places that are on the main strip of where tourists might be, but I always try and look a street or two back to find the more local places that might have a little bit more character and personality. And with Bean's Goodie, we certainly were not disappointed. So this was in a very quiet alleyway, about 15 minutes walk from the Golden Temple. When you walk inside the coffee shop, it feels like you've stepped back in time a few hundred years. The shop is owned and run by a single woman who does all of the work herself. When we opened the creaky wooden door and walked into the dimly lit coffee shop, there was a warm gas fire burning, and we were the only people in the coffee shop aside from this old lady who was sitting in the back corner. She was there before us, and she was still there when we left an hour and a half later. And she was in full conversation with the coffee shop owner. That is, when she wasn't falling asleep mid-mouthful, like in this photograph here. I think that she is at this coffee shop every day because of the familiarity that I saw between the two of them. They would be having a fat conversation, and then the old lady would just fall asleep mid-sentence. This didn't surprise the coffee shop owner in the least, and she would go back to her work. And when the old lady woke up, they would resume their conversation from where they had left off, as though no time had passed in between. We spent a wonderful hour and a half at this coffee shop, and it was a beautiful, quiet downtime during the middle of our very busy touring day. We made a very conscious decision on our tour of Japan to mix up the major tourist sites with things and places that were beyond the beaten track and off the main roads, to try and also find those places that were special and unique, and also just to slow down the pace of our holiday somewhat. So every single day we would find a coffee shop or a restaurant where I could sit and sketch, and Andrew would do his crosswords or read a book. So this is the page in my travel sketchbook that I drew on that day in this coffee shop. So this sketch was drawn on location, but it was drawn from a photograph because I was sitting inside the coffee shop at the time of sketching it. The owner was so excited to see me pull out my sketchbook that she brought along the guest book for the coffee shop and asked me to sketch something in it. She was absolutely overjoyed when I basically sketched a much simpler version of the sketch that I'm doing right now inside her sketchbook. So if you ever find yourself inside that coffee shop, ask her to see the guest book, and I'm sure she'll show it to you, and you'll find my sketch from March earlier this year inside that book. She was so excited at the sketch that I produced that she suddenly found herself wanting to give me something in return, and what she gave me was the 2 stickers that you can see on the page in the sketchbook. And then also I saw her flurry behind her countertop, and she also came out with a coaster of Mount Fuji, which is now on the table in our lounge. And I think it is when we make relationships and have experiences like this when we are on holiday that these are the things that stay with us the most. In fact, this was the most memorable thing of that day. And whilst the Golden Pavilion was the reason why we were in this area in the first place, I can definitely say that this experience outweighed that of the Golden Pavilion tenfold at least. I find it is often those chance encounters with people or those places that are 2 or 3 streets back that often give us the most memorable experiences on any holiday rather than anything we might have actually planned on our itinerary. The pen I'm going to use today is a Sailor Fude fountain pen with a 40-degree nib, and the ink I'm going to use is Noodler's ink in brown colour. I have been on the hunt for some brown ink for quite some time. I haven't been able to source it anywhere in Thailand. Noodler's ink is a US brand, and my friend Julie kindly bought it back for me from the States last week when she returned from her trip. Julie also bought back this Sailor Fude fountain pen for me so that I had a pen to put the ink into. A Fude pen is a fountain pen that has got a bent nib, as you can see in the photograph here. Having a bent nib means that the width of the line varies depending on the angle that you hold the pen onto the page. I quite like to do this for my travel sketching because it does give a little bit more of a relaxed look to the sketch because of the variation in the line width. I wanted to try out this 40-degree nib because I also have the green Sailor Fude pen that has got a 55-degree nib. And I find that with this one, the line width does not get quite as wide as it does with the green one, but it still has quite a nice variation, and I did enjoy using it on the sketch. I was a little bit concerned after my purchase of the Noodler's ink because I assumed that it was going to be waterproof when I bought it, and only after buying it did I do a little bit more research and realize that not all Noodler's inks are waterproof. Some of them are and some of them aren't. I then got in a bit of a panic and I couldn't find any information on the particular ink that I had purchased. I do know now that I've done some research that you do get a Noodler's ink called a bulletproof ink, and those, if it says bulletproof, are definitely waterproof. I was a little bit concerned because I didn't see that labeling anywhere on the box or on my product's description. But I am pleased to say that I did get this ink and give it a try when I got it, and it is waterproof. So that is a huge relief. What I'm going to do is just include the code of the products in this photograph that you can see here, in case you are wanting to buy the same ink for yourself. I'm sure that you can see that as I work through the sketch, I'm trying my hardest to not make the lines dead straight. I have an architect for a father, so straight lines are in my DNA, but I also know that having such straight lines does make your sketches be a little bit less spontaneous and have a bit less character. So having the texture in the cold pressed paper does also cause the pen to wobble slightly, and I'm using a loose wrist to allow the lines to be a little bit wobbly if they end up being that way. I definitely wouldn't say that this is a loose sketch. If it was, there would be a lot less detail in it than it is. But I'm also trying as hard as I can to not make it an architectural rendering. So having lines that aren't completely straight does give it a little bit more character, I feel. So I'm going to continue working in my ink pen now, going over the lines that I've already laid down in pencil and adding any additional detail that I can see as I work through the sketch. So just to explain a bit about the perspective lines on this wall that's on the left-hand side of the door here, if you have a look at some of the guidelines that I put on the sketch diagram, you'll see that the lines above the halfway mark point slightly downwards, whereas the lines below the halfway mark point slightly upwards. Getting these perspective lines correct will really help the sketch look more three-dimensional and realistic. So I start by putting 3 or 4 guidelines down, and then once I've got them, I will then go and put the lines in between, following the same sort of fan-like shape that I've already laid down with the guidelines. I think we're nearing the end now. I'm just going to do the last bits and pieces. I'll put the coffee cup in on the sign and try my hand a little bit at some of the Japanese writing that's on the sign there. A little bit more heavy weighting on the edge of the banner, and then some horizontal lines behind the slats. I actually make quite a big mistake here with these horizontal lines. That little blackboard that is above the drum, you'll see that I ended up putting horizontal lines through that, which is a complete mistake. There was nothing to be done. I had to then just incorporate that into the sketch, and I actually dropped the blackboard that's on top of the drum. Then these curbing lines are very long horizontal lines, and I make sure that I don't do full continuous lines, but rather break them up into smaller segments, which is easier on the eye. To get the perspective lines correct on the curbing, on the layer of the curbing that is horizontal, flat with the pavement, I will start with a vertical line in the center and then gradually fan my lines out to the left and then to the right of the center line. And then from each of these lines, I'll drop a vertical line straight down to the street. Then I'm going to add a few joins along the gutter at the top, make my gutter pipe line weighting a little bit heavier, and then I'll add some what looks like a bit of wood grain effect to the cement drum. And lastly, I'm just going to thicken the lines along the curbing. Once my ink is completely dry, I can move on to the painting stage. I spray my paints with water just to activate them, and I'm going to start with the roof tiles working in Soda Light Genuine. Soda Light Genuine is a lovely blue-grey colour, which I think is ideal for the roof tiles, but if you don't have this colour, then something like Payne's Grey would work perfectly well. As I lay down the first wash on the roof tiles, there's just 2 points to note. The first is that you can see that I'm leaving the very left-hand side of each of the roof tiles white to act as a bit of an accent. This really does help accentuate the curve on the roof tiles as well as add a little bit of contrast. Then I know I want more than one layer of colour on the roof tiles, so the first layer that I put down I want to be very light. Initially the colour that I had put down was too dark, and you can see that I lightened the colour and also went back and tried to lift some of the original colour that I'd laid down to make it a little bit lighter. Soda Light Genuine is a Daniel Smith Primatech colour, and it is a naturally granulating colour which I like for something like roof tiles where you're looking for a bit of variation in colour. So I'm going to work through this first layer with the Soda Light Genuine. I'm not trying to create too much texture or difference in colour. I'm going to put this lighter layer down, allow it to dry, and then I'm going to come in and put in a little bit more of a contrast colour on top. So make sure to keep this first layer really light so that the entire sketch doesn't end up too dark. Whilst that first layer has still got some moisture in it, I'm going to now come in with a thicker consistency mix of the Soda Light Genuine and drop that in places on the roof tiles, particularly towards the right hand side of each roof tile, because that is where the shadow would be cast by each tile on the right hand side of it. Now I'm going to work on the door, and for this I'm going to use burnt umber. I'm going to start by making a very weak consistency mix of the burnt umber on my palette and then drop that in for the door. I want to keep this first layer really watery and very transparent so that I can drop in different textures later on. I'm going to make sure that I stay within the lines for the edge of the door and also cut around the coffee cup sign that's hanging over the door. Whilst that very watery first layer of burnt umber is still wet, I'm going to mix up a thicker consistency mix of the same color and then drop it in around the door to give a little bit of a change in texture and consistency so that the color on the door is not all the same. It's important to do this before the first layer dries so that the colors are able to blend and that you don't get firm edges around the color that you're dropping in. And whilst this color is still on my brush, I will use it to go around the edges of the standing blackboard as well as for the little table on the right hand side. I want to get a bit of color into the pots that are on top of the box, so I'm going to use this color for some of the pots and also put it as a bit of a base color on the box. I'll make sure to not cover the whole box, leave a little bit of white here and there that I can add other colors to once this one is dry. I will add some raw sienna to the brown color and add that into the box as well for a bit of a difference in color. I then rinse off my brush a little bit, but there is still some burnt umber on the brush, and I mix that in with the Sodalite Genuine, and that makes a nice base shadow color that I'm going to put down on the wall on the left hand side. I'm just going to use the same color on the side facing us as well as the side on the right, and I'll do the shadow side in another layer. Now for the main exterior color of the coffee shop. I can see it's a very dark brown color and also possibly with a little bit of purple undertones to it. So I will start by putting together a mix of sepia, which is a very dark brown, and then add a bit of burnt sienna to it to warm it up. After that, I'm going to add some carbazole violet to get that purple undertone to the brown. With this as a very watery consistency so that it stays wet on the page, I'm going to put the first layer down on the exterior. When I get to this area where the pot plants are going to be, I cut around and leave some area white for where I'm going to paint the green leaves later so that they stand out bright and clear. going to now push these roof tiles a little bit darker on the right hand side. And now I will use this thicker consistency Sodalite Genuine to put the shadow under the front row of roof tiles. Then I'll add a little bit of the wall color to this Sodalite Genuine mix, just so that the color is not exactly the same. And I'll use this weak consistency mix to put in the gutter. I feel that the color of the door has dried a little light now, so I'm going to mix up some burnt umber again, and I'm going to work wet and wet by putting plain water onto the door first and then dropping in the thicker consistency of the burnt umber. I want to do the shadow on the inside of this drum now, so I'm going to put down water first, just on the upper oval, and then I'm going to use one of the shadow colors that I've got on my palette and drop it in at the top, just under the rim, and then blend the shadow color downwards. And at the front, I will do a bit of a shadow at the top and down the left-hand side of the drum. There is a bit of a ledge here. I'm going to put a shadow on the top of it. I'm going to work on the pavement now, and to do that I'm going to use the remaining greys and blues that are on my palette. I'm going to water it down a lot and lay that down in a very weak consistency on the pavement. I want to add a bit of a muted green into the pavement as well, and to do that I'm going to add a little bit of undersea green into the mix. For the street, I'm going to use a dry brushing technique. In order to do this, I load up my brush with paint and I sweep my brush across the dry page. Because of the textured nature of the cold pressed paper, some of the little grooves won't get any paint in it, and I like that sort of texture that it gives me for the road. I want to push the shadow under the first row of the roof tiles darker, so to do that I'm going to use a fairly concentrated mix of neutral tint and lay that down. These additional bits of intense contrast and shadow that I'm now going to start selectively putting in on the sketch are the things that are going to start making it look a little bit more three-dimensional, and for certain areas of the sketch to really start to pop. And I think it's these final touches that really do give the impact that we're looking for. Now I'm going to add a shadow behind the wooden struts. I know that there's more detail than this in the photograph, but I think that putting a shadow behind the slats will suffice. Putting this shadow in really does push the wooden slats towards us and push the shadow area backwards. I will add a bit of a shadow on the back legs of the blackboard as well as to the back legs of the table. I want to give the step a bit of texture, so I'm going to use dry brush effect here as well. I'll just try and use the remains of whatever's on my palette to make the cement color for the curbing and lay down a first layer for that. I am going to mix up some undersea green now to give a darker contrast color to the green that I've already got down for the plants, and I'll dot that in around just so that I've got more than one color green on the plants. And now on the right hand side of this wall I'm going to add some shadow using whatever shadow color is on my palette. Whilst this base layer of shadow color that I've put on the wall is still wet, I'm going to mix up a much thicker consistency of neutral tint and drop that in on the top and right hand corner to try and accentuate the shadow that is coming from under the roof, and then I will blend it out. Now I want to put down a very strong shadow under the top of the wall that's underneath the roof here. So I'm going to work wet and wet, and I will start by laying down some water, making sure to skip out the little coffee cup sign as well as the beans goodie sign. I'm going to work around those. Once the water layer is down, I'm going to drop in a very thick mix of neutral tint. I'm going to push this really dark and then use a wet brush to blend the shadow color downwards. I'm really pleased with the difference that this contrast has made to the three-dimensional look to the sketch, and it's really starting to come together now. Remember that saying, if it looks right when it's wet, it's wrong? I always go back to that, and although this shadow looks great as it is now, I know that it's going to dry lighter, so I'm going to take the opportunity to push the darkest area at the top even darker. It's important to be brave like this, to be able to push your contrast as much as you can, because that really is the thing that does make your sketch pop. I'm going to work wet and wet now to get a bit of texture on the beans goodie sign. I'm going to lay down a wet layer, but I'm going to avoid the two pole areas at the top and the bottom of the sign. Once I've got water down in the center, I will just drop in some very light shadow along where the seam would be and throughout the sign, just so that it's not all one color, but I'm not going to overdo it.